Good afternoon, Dr. Robertson, and thank you very much for joining us. We are very honored to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me to Oklahoma.
On our campus, yes. Just a couple quick questions. We'd like to. Some of these came from Facebook, and some are just I thought would be interesting. But I think just a good question to ask about the Civil War is, why do you think the Civil War is important for us to even study today?
Oh, I think modern America began in 1865. Until then, we were floundering around trying to figure out where federalism would stop, where state rights would still prevail. The issue of slavery had to be resolved one way or the other. And I think after the Civil War, with the industrializing North in full gear and King Cotton dying away, that the modern, powerful country we know began with Lincoln's death.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, with that, I mean, sort of why are we so fascinated with the Civil War today? I mean, we know there's so many books, and constantly there's hundreds of books on Lincoln, and
Indeed,
why is that?
That's one of the reasons we're fascinated with it. We're flooded with printed literature on the book, on the war. The Library of Congress estimates 80,000 books, etc. Biography is the most popular form of history telling, and for sheer impact and number, no period in history produces more great men that we remember than those 4 years of war. Abraham Lincoln, Robert E. Lee, U.S. Grant, Stonewall Jackson, the list goes on and on and on. And it was the last war of simple folk, living in a simple way, and displaying all the grits and attributes that make the common folk still the basis of our country.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. We talk about someone like Abraham Lincoln, and I know you are very highly on Abraham Lincoln, think highly. Do you think that the war made Abraham Lincoln, or was Abraham Lincoln, would he have been a great president without the Civil War?
I think so. I think, on the other hand, the war called for extraordinary greatness, which a few Americans can have demonstrated in the presidency, but except Lincoln had that. It's called in historical circles a capacity for growth. He was not a promising president. His background hardly instilled confidence. But once he faced that crisis, he seemed to grow in it, largely through an incredible patience, a foresightedness, and a farsightedness that an average human being doesn't have. And he just personified all that is America by giving of himself, the last full measure of devotion. So martyrdom has done a lot for Abraham Lincoln, but his own deeds, I think, immortalize him.
Mm-hmm. How about men like we're talking tonight about Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson? Do you think there's a reason maybe that they're the losing generals in a way, but in a lot of ways they're maybe the more popular? When people think of Civil War generals today, Lee and Jackson are probably the very forefront, even more so than Grant and Sherman.
Yes, and Lee was such a consummate soldier. It was hard to get angry at him. He just had this demeanor, this aura of respect and dignity about him. He was also something else that Americans adore, a good loser. He could have been bitter. He could have sent his men at Appomattox into the woods and the byways to wage guerrilla warfare, but this he would not do. And he said, in essence, we have tried honorably to gain our independence. We fail. We must honorably now all become good Americans. And I often say that in the 5 years following the Civil War, the man who exerted the most strength and gave the most donations toward bringing this nation back together was Robert E. Lee.
It's interesting. So you think it's the fact that he almost did lose and lost graciously then,
yes,
is what makes him so honored.
Yes, even in Appomattox, Grant was himself uncomfortable around him. He was just this aura to Lee that I think Robert Duvall captures so wonderfully in the movie Gods and Generals.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Jackson, because of his early death, would be sort of the same?
Yes. The what ifs are endless in Civil War history, but if the man has to die at some point, he died at the high point for his own career. He was at the time of Chancellorsville and his mortal wounding, the most esteemed general in the world. Lee had still not proven himself by the spring of 1863, so the loss of Jackson at that critical moment has much to do with the ongoing worship of him.
Makes sense. The one question I want to ask, because I get asked this constantly since the movie came out, what were your opinions of the Abraham Lincoln film?
I liked the film. I liked it very much. I think Daniel Day-Lewis was born to play that role. Yeah. Main issue of the role, the passage of the 13th Amendment bill, is so ignored and yet so vital to the growth of America that I think the movie, concentrating on it, was worth doing. The performances, I thought, were outstanding. Save one, I take issue as a Southerner with the surrender scene at Appomattox, when in fact Grant came down the steps and lifted his hat in salute. In fact, the Union generals did too. In fact, Robert E. Lee lifted his hat, but in the movie, this man gives a kind of swipe at his hat and a flippant kind of wave. Lee would not have done that. He would have lifted his hat and bowed graciously in acknowledgement. But, that's nitpicking. Films, Hollywood has never been accused of educating anyone, but they entertain. And the opening of the movie was a little unsettling. In 1865, early 1865, the soldiers would not have known the Gettysburg Address and certainly could not have quoted it. But that's Hollywood. And
made good drama.
Yes, that creates the drama that maybe was not there.
Yeah, I've oftentimes, I really enjoyed the book that it was based on. I thought, I wish I could show more of Lincoln handling his own men in the cabinet, and how he took rivals, as the book is, how he took those rivals and turned them into colleagues and made them love him in a way. Anything about that?
No, I think the way he worked with the common soldiers, he never let them forget that he was like them, from the common people of the country, a Western frontiersman, and he always talked about Union soldiers as my boys. Mm-hmm. Jefferson Davis did not have that kind of personality, and hence Davis was Mr. Davis, or the president, to everybody, never Jefferson, and it's impossible to think of anyone calling him Jeff. But Mr. Lincoln became Old Abe, Mr. Lincoln, or Father Abraham to the people of the North.
Yeah, it was a good film. I do have one question that came from our Facebook. We asked people to send in, and they asked, why do you think that Jackson performed so poorly during the 7 days battle?
He was physically exhausted. In my biography, I take 2 chapters to explain just what happened to him. In the second week of June of '62, he completed the Valley Campaign. He had led his men 676 miles in 48 days, fought 6 battles. That would be enough to warrant a 6-month vacation. But instead, he goes from the final battlefield. He rides all the way by horseback over the mountains to Richmond, meets with Lee, rides back to his army, back in the valley, then brings his army east to wage the help Lee in the 7 days campaign. He had never been in that area. His men were unfamiliar with that area. Jackson was missing his principal map maker, Jedediah Hotchkiss, who taught him how to read a map and how to go. So Jackson was blind the whole time. But throughout all of this, he's not eating, he is not sleeping, and he was late getting there. He did not perform well. In fact, on the 3rd night of the campaign, he was sitting at a table with his aides having supper, and he went to sleep with a biscuit in his mouth. He was just exhausted. And I think it was just a simple, he had done everything, and he just collapsed from it all. Thereafter, of course, he never disappointed Lee.
No.
Never.
One last question. What can we take from today? What can we learn from today by studying the Civil War?
The first thing you can learn is what I told your class this morning. This nation is a wonderful nation. It's in the minds of myself and others the greatest nation that probably will ever exist. But it hangs by a shoestring. One thing holds it together, and that from the beginning and into the day, it's the spirit of compromise. We have to give and take. We cannot say, I will not compromise, and claim to be Americans. The minute we forget to compromise or refuse to compromise, we're going to have chaos. And if you're a student of history, you see this. Watch the 1850s unroll, and the politicians are saying, I'm not moving. I will not take an opposite stand. I won't sit down and work this out with you. And we ended up with a civil war. That was inevitable, not by chance. It was inevitable. democracies have to have give and take. And until we get that, we cannot call ourselves a freedom-loving people.
All right, great. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.